The thing about my father is that he doesn't whisper his cruelties. He announces them. He was standing near the refreshment table at my grandmother's repast, the buffet line she would have hated, all store-bought rolls and that watery lemonade, talking to my Uncle Garrett as though the rest of us weren't within earshot, as though I wasn't 8 feet away refilling a cup of coffee I didn't even want, just to have somewhere to stand. "Claire will handle all of it," he said. "She's always been the capable one." Garrett nodded. "What about Nora?" My father paused, not from uncertainty, from the particular kind of consideration a person gives when they're about to say something they've already decided. "Nobody needs Nora," he said. "She'll be fine. She always lands somewhere." I set the coffee cup down before I dropped it. 37 years old, a licensed hospice social worker with a master's degree from the University of Vermont, a woman who had driven 4 hours every month for the last 2 years to sit with Dorothy May Callahan, my grandmother, his mother, through every difficult conversation, every medication adjustment, every 3 a.m. phone call she couldn't bring herself to make to anyone else. And in 11 words, standing beside a tray of deli sandwiches 3 hours after her burial, my father had summarized my entire existence in the family. "Nobody needs Nora. She'll be fine." My name is Nora Jean Callahan. I'm the second of 3 children, the middle daughter, the one who went into caregiving instead of corporate law like my sister Claire, or finance like my brother Daniel. I've never owned a home. I rent a small apartment in Burlington, Vermont. I drive a 7-year-old Subaru with a cracked rear bumper. By my family's measurement system, I have very little to show for my life. What I had until 4 days ago was my grandmother. And now she was gone. And my father was already redistributing the world without me in it. What I didn't know yet, what none of us knew, was that Dorothy May Callahan had left something behind. Not in the way any of us expected. Not a will amendment or a surprise bank account. Something far more precise and far more devastating to the people who thought they'd already written the ending to this story. Dorothy was 81 years old when she died, and she was sharp until the last 6 weeks. That matters. It matters because the people who would later question her judgment needed to understand what they were up against. A woman who had managed a family property in coastal Maine for 40 years, raised 3 children, largely alone after my grandfather's death in 1987, and kept her own financial records by hand in a leather ledger she updated every Sunday morning. She was not confused. She was not manipulated. She was deliberate. The property was the center of everything, as it always had been. 13 acres in Pemaquid Point, Maine, including a 4-bedroom house built in 1961, a guest cottage, and approximately 340 feet of private shoreline. My father, Richard Callahan, had been managing the property finances since 2019, when Dorothy's arthritis made the paperwork difficult. He paid the taxes, he handled the insurance, he coordinated repairs. In doing so, he had quietly convinced himself that management was the same as ownership. He wasn't malicious in the beginning. I want to be fair about that. My father is not a villain from a movie. He's a 68-year-old retired insurance executive from Falmouth, Massachusetts, who genuinely believes that the world is organized by usefulness, and that the people who handle the practical things have earned the authority over outcomes. He loves his family in the way some people love their cars. He maintains them, takes pride in them, makes sure they function, but would never think to ask what they want. Claire, 41, is an estate attorney in Boston. She is my father's idea of what a daughter should be. Precise, accomplished, and never emotionally inconvenient. She has my father's eyebrows and his conviction that sentiment is a weakness belonging to people who can't afford better. Daniel, 34, is the youngest and the most genuinely kind of my 3 immediate family members. He works in commercial lending in Portland, Oregon, which keeps him safely distant from family politics, a distance I've always suspected he curates deliberately. And then there's me, the one who chose social work, the one who never married, the one who spent her professional life sitting with people in the last chapters of their lives, holding the hard conversations that families avoided, learning how to be present in rooms where presence was the only useful thing left. My father has always seen this as a limitation, as evidence that I lacked the ambition to want more. What he never understood was that I had wanted exactly this, and that my grandmother had understood that about me from the time I was 19 years old and told her, sitting on her porch in Maine with a cup of black tea, that I wanted to work with people who were dying because I thought death deserved as much attention as any other part of life. She had looked at me for a long moment and said, "Good, someone in this family should know how to be honest." I had thought about that sentence 1,000 times in the years since. I would think about it 10,000 more in the weeks that followed her death. The estate attorney's name was Margaret Ouellette. She had an office in Damariscotta, Maine, which is a small coastal town about 20 minutes from the Pemaquid property. She had been Dorothy's attorney for 19 years. The reading was scheduled for 11 days after the funeral, November 14th, a Wednesday at 10 in the morning. My father had been calling Margaret's office every 2 days since the burial, and I know this because Margaret told me so later, with a particular tone that said she had formed an opinion about my father without offering it directly. We drove up separately. My father and Claire came together from Massachusetts in my father's Lexus. Daniel flew in from Portland and rented a car. I drove my Subaru from Burlington, arriving in Damariscotta at 9:42, found a parking space on Main Street, and sat in my car for 11 minutes, watching the gray November sky over the harbor. Margaret's office was above a dental practice, up a narrow staircase with a wooden railing worn smooth by years of hands. The waiting area had 4 chairs, a side table with a ceramic lamp, and a window that looked out over the street. Claire was on her phone when I came in. My father stood when he saw me, which surprised me. Then I realized he was just repositioning himself, not greeting me. "Nora," he said, and then turned back to the window. Daniel gave me a hug, a real one. He smelled like airport coffee and tired travel, and I was glad he was there. Margaret came out at exactly 10 o'clock. She was somewhere in her late 60s, with silver-white hair cut short and reading glasses on a chain that she didn't use as decoration. She shook everyone's hand, told us she was sorry for our loss in a way that sounded genuinely felt rather than professionally required, and led us back to her conference room. It was a real conference room. Not large, a rectangular table that seated 6, chairs with green upholstered seats, a window overlooking a back courtyard where someone had left a bird feeder nobody had filled recently. She set a manila folder on the table in front of her and sat down. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to explain that Dorothy left specific instructions about the order in which things are to be presented today. I'm going to honor those instructions exactly as she gave them to me. There will be a point where I ask you to be patient, and I'm asking for that patience now in advance." My father put his hands flat on the table. "Margaret, we've been waiting 11 days. Let's just—" "Richard." Her voice didn't rise, it simply held. "I'll be brief, but I'll do it in the order Dorothy requested." He leaned back. She opened the folder. The will itself was not complicated. Dorothy had divided the liquid assets of a savings account with $41,200, a small investment portfolio worth approximately $68,000 at the time of her death, into 3 equal portions among her children. Richard, Claire's father. Then to Claire and Daniel as the grandchildren she explicitly named. The percentages were standard, the language was clean, and my father's posture relaxed visibly as Margaret read through it. I watched his shoulders settle. I was in the will, a modest bequest, $12,000, and a specific list of personal items including a writing desk, a set of china, and a box of letters and photographs. I noticed Claire glance at the personal items list with a flicker of something I couldn't immediately name. Then Margaret paused. She closed the first document and set it aside. She reached into the folder and produced a sealed envelope cream-colored, the kind that comes in a box from a proper stationery store. On the front, in my grandmother's unmistakable handwriting, was written, "To be read aloud in full. M. Ouellette has my instructions." "Dorothy prepared this letter 14 months ago," Margaret said. "She updated it 7 months ago and asked me to hold the final version. She was specific. It is to be read aloud to all of you. In this room, after the will has been read and before anyone leaves. My father's recovered composure lasted approximately 4 seconds. "What is that?" he asked. "A letter," Margaret said, "from your mother." "Is it a codicil, an amendment?" "No." Margaret was already opening the envelope with a letter opener that had a green malachite handle. "It's a letter. It has no legal force regarding asset distribution, but it was Dorothy's explicit wish that you all hear it." "Margaret, if it doesn't change anything legally, I'm not sure we need to." "I do," Daniel said quietly. He was looking at the envelope with a stillness that I recognized, the look of someone who suspects they are about to learn something they should have known years ago. Claire said nothing. She was watching me. I was watching the letter. Margaret smoothed the pages, 3 of them, handwritten on both sides, and settled her hands. She looked up once, briefly, and something in her expression told me she had read this letter more than once, that she knew what was coming, that she had her own feelings about it, kept carefully behind professional glass. She began to read. "To my children and grandchildren, I've never been a woman who avoided difficult conversations. You all know this. I raised you to believe that honesty is not cruelty, it's the price of real love. So I hope you'll receive what I have to say in that spirit, even if it stings going down. Richard, I love you. I've always loved you. But I've watched you manage this family the way you managed your insurance book by deciding who is a liability and who is an asset, and treating everyone accordingly. I want you to know, before I say anything else, that I see where that came from. Your father did the same thing. You learned it honestly, but learning something honestly doesn't make it right to keep doing." The room was absolutely still. My father's jaw had set like concrete. Margaret continued, "You have spent the last several years, and honestly the last several decades, acting as though Nora is an afterthought in this family. I've heard what you say about her choices. I've heard the way you describe her work as just social work. I want you to understand what that work actually looked like from where I was sitting. Nora drove to see me 41 times in the last 26 months. I kept track. She came when I called, and I called her at hours that would have been unreasonable to ask of most people. She sat with me through the conversations about my diagnosis that I couldn't have with you because you needed me to be fine. She helped me understand my options when the doctors in Damariscotta started talking about what comes next. She held my hand in a way that didn't feel like obligation. She never once mentioned that it was inconvenient. Not once. I was staring at the surface of the conference table. The wood had a knot in it, light brown against darker grain, and I was studying it with tremendous attention because it was the only thing in the room I could look at without losing my composure entirely. I am not writing this letter to punish anyone. I'm writing it because I spent 40 years hoping you would all figure certain things out on your own. And some of you did, and some of you didn't. And I'm 81 years old, and I don't have the luxury of another 40 years of hoping. The property. I need to talk about the property." My father moved his hands to his lap. I noticed that without meaning to. "Richard believes he has earned a primary claim to Pemaquid because he has managed the finances for the last several years. I understand why he believes this. He's put real time into it. But managing something and earning it are different things. And I want to be clear, while I am still in a position to be clear, about what I observed. In 2020, Richard recommended we refinance the property insurance through his former employer's affiliated company. I agreed. What I found out later, and Nora did not tell me this, I found it myself, because I still read every document I signed, was that the policy carried a referral arrangement that benefited Richard financially. It was not illegal, but it was not disclosed to me. I was his mother, not a business client, and the difference should have mattered to him. I also know that in the summer of 2021, Richard told Daniel and Claire that I had agreed to sell the cottage to offset property taxes. I never agreed to that. I specifically told Richard I did not want the cottage sold. The conversation he reported to your siblings did not happen the way he reported it. I am not angry. I am clear. There is a difference. Daniel made a sound, not quite a word, something that started in his chest. He was looking at our father with an expression I had never seen on Daniel's face before. He is the gentle one, the accommodating one, the one who smooths. But what was on his face in that moment wasn't anger, exactly. It was the particular look of a person realizing that a map they've been using for years has been drawn wrong. Claire had gone very, very still. My father said, "That's mother was—" He stopped, started again. She didn't understand the full context of the insurance. "Richard," Margaret did not look up from the page. "I'm going to ask you to let me finish. I have spoken with Margaret at length about what I am able to do. The property and its assets are addressed in the formal will. What I am able to do here in this letter is something different. I am able to tell the truth about this family. I am able to say, for the record, that Nora has given more of herself to this family than any of you have accounted for. I am able to say that the way you have talked about her, and around her, and past her, has been a source of grief to me for longer than I have ever said out loud. And I am able to leave her the one thing I kept for myself." Margaret paused. She set down the pages. She reached into the folder a second time and produced a smaller envelope, this one with my name on it. "Just Nora," in my grandmother's script. She held it across the table toward me. "Dorothy asked me to give you this separately," Margaret said. "It's your grandmother's personal journal from the last 2 years. She wanted you to have it privately." My father's eyes went to the journal-sized envelope like he'd been struck. "There's one more page," Margaret said, and picked up the letter again. "I want to say something to Nora directly, and I want her siblings to hear it, and I want Richard to hear it most of all. Nora, you chose a life that this family didn't know how to value because we were measuring with the wrong instruments. You chose presence over prestige, and I know the cost of that choice better than you think. I chose something similar once, a long time ago, and I was told by people whose opinions I respected too much that I had settled. I didn't settle, I chose. There's a difference, and it took me decades to stop apologizing for it. You never apologized for it, not once. I watched you walk into rooms where your father barely acknowledged you and stand there with your spine straight and your face composed, and I thought every single time, there is the most dignified person in this family, and nobody is telling her so. I'm telling you now. The writing desk I left you, look in the bottom drawer. I left you something small. It won't change what's in the will, and it doesn't need to. You'll understand when you see it. I love you all. I love you in different measures for different reasons, and I'm done pretending those measures are equal. Because love that pretends to be something it's not isn't love, it's just good manners. Don't mistake the two. With everything I have left, Dorothy May Callahan. October 9th, 2023. Margaret set the pages down, folded them precisely, and placed them back in the envelope. She did not look at anyone immediately. She gave the room 30 seconds. 30 seconds is a very long time. My father was the first to speak. His voice was different, not chastened exactly, but scraped of its usual authority, the way a familiar piece of furniture looks strange once you've moved it out of its normal corner. I want to say that some of what my mother described was Dad. Claire spoke without moving. Not right now. It was the last thing I expected from her, but she said it with a flatness that I recognized, the tone of someone who is filing information away before she makes any visible decisions about it. Claire is precise, even in shock. Daniel had his elbows on the table and his face in his hands. Not crying, just somewhere else for a moment. I was holding the small envelope with my name on it. I had not opened it. I just held it, and felt its weight, and thought about my grandmother's hands writing my name on the front of it. Just Nora, like there was only one person in the world who bore it. We left Margaret's office in the order we arrived, except backwards. Daniel went first, and he waited for me at the bottom of the stairs. He hugged me again, longer this time, and I felt the particular weight of a person who is carrying something new and hasn't decided yet how to put it down. "I didn't know about the cottage," he said quietly. "He told me you agreed." "I know you didn't know. Nora, I know, Dan." My father came down the stairs last. He paused at the bottom, with Claire behind him. And he looked at me. He's a tall man, still, despite age narrowing him somewhat. He has a full head of white hair and blue eyes that have spent 6 decades communicating competence. He looked at me the way a person looks at a sentence they've just reread and discovered means something different than they thought. He didn't apologize, not that day. That would have required a different man than the one who walked out of Margaret Ouellette's office into the thin November cold of a Maine coastal street. What he said was, "I didn't know she felt that way." Which is its own kind of admission, if you know how to read it. He didn't say your grandmother was wrong. He didn't say, "I don't know what she was talking about." He said he didn't know, which means, on some level, he had known there was something to know. I nodded. I didn't give him the sentence he was waiting for, some version of, "It's okay, Dad." The familiar absolution he'd been collecting from me his entire adult life. I just nodded, and I got in my Subaru, and I drove to the property. I let myself in with the key Dorothy had given me 11 years ago, the one I'd never returned, and she'd never asked for back. The house smelled like wood smoke and linen and the particular cold of a coastal house in November, that specific chill that comes up through the floors regardless of the heat. I turned on the lamp in the sitting room and stood there for a moment with my coat still on. The writing desk was in the corner where it had always been, a roll-top mahogany, older than my father. Dorothy had written letters at it every Sunday afternoon for as long as I could remember. It was the piece of furniture I had told her I loved when I was a child, not because it was valuable, but because I loved watching her sit at it. The set of her shoulders, the way she held a pen, the sound of the drawer sliding open. I sat down in the chair and opened the bottom drawer. There was a small wooden box inside, hinged lid, no lock. Inside the box was a note card, and beneath the note card, a key. The note card said, "Storage Unit 114, Blue Harbor Storage, Route 1, Newcastle. Paid through April 2024. Ask for Terry, he knows." And beneath that, in smaller letters, "I have been keeping your history safe. Now you keep it yourself." I sat with the note card for a long time. Outside, the sky over Pemaquid Point had gone the particular slate gray of late afternoon in November, and through the sitting room window I could see the silhouette of the shoreline against it, the water beyond gone dark and silver. I didn't know yet what was in that storage unit. I'd find out the following morning. Terry, a compact man of about 50 with a Red Sox hat and no interest in drama, would unlock Unit 114 and step back, and I'd find 8 bankers' boxes of files, photographs, and correspondence. My grandmother's documentation of 40 years of family life, kept with the same quiet precision she'd applied to everything. Financial records, property correspondence, a folder of printed emails from 2019 through 2023, annotated in her handwriting in the margins. Insurance documents with specific figures circled, not assembled to attack anyone. Assembled because Dorothy Callahan was a woman who believed that if something was real, it deserved to be recorded. But that was tomorrow. That evening, I sat at her desk with the key in my palm and thought about 41 drives to Pemaquid. I thought about 3 a.m. phone calls and medication charts, and sitting beside her hospital bed in August with a crossword puzzle between us because she couldn't sleep and didn't want to be alone, and didn't want to talk about it, just wanted another human being in the room. I thought about what it costs to be the person who shows up. Not financially, not professionally. The other cost. The one nobody adds up, the accumulated weight of being present for someone over years, of rearranging your life repeatedly in ways that don't produce anything visible, that don't generate a title or a salary or a credit on a resume. The kind of showing up that leaves no record except in the heart of the person you showed up for. Except Dorothy had left a record. In her own meticulous way, she had left a record. Claire called me 3 weeks later. Not my father, Claire. She asked if she could come to Burlington. I said yes, partly out of genuine curiosity and partly because I've spent my professional life learning that the conversations people are finally ready to have are worth having. She came on a Saturday in December, and we sat in my kitchen with tea I'd made too strong, and she was quiet for a while before she said anything real. I knew something was off, she said finally. About the cottage conversation. I knew, and I asked Dad one question and accepted the answer because it was easier. She turned her tea mug in a slow circle on the table. That's not something I've allowed myself to do professionally in 15 years. I would never accept one source on something that significant. But he's my father, and I wanted to trust him, and so I made the choice to trust him. It was the most honest thing my sister had ever said to me. Maybe the most honest thing she'd said to anyone. It had cost her something to say it. I could tell by the careful flatness of her delivery, the way she was not looking at me directly while she said it. I know, I said. I'm sorry, Nora. I didn't say it's fine, or it's okay, because it wasn't fine and it wasn't okay, and Claire is the last person who needs the comfortable lie. Instead, I said, I know you are. And we sat with that for a while, which is sometimes all there is to do. My father and I have spoken 4 times since the reading. Short conversations, updates about the property, which is now being administered through a formal arrangement that Margaret helped establish. He is still involved in the management because he's still competent, and because my grandmother did not intend to destroy him, only to correct the record. He has not said the words I was wrong about how he talked about me or about me. I don't expect him to. He is 68 years old, and those words are a distance he may never be able to travel. What he has done is something smaller and more real. He asks for my input now, where he didn't before. He told Daniel in a phone call. Daniel told me that he hadn't understood how much Nora had done for her grandmother. Not I was wrong, but something adjacent to it, a partial accounting. I've stopped waiting for the full one. Not because I've given up, but because I've learned from years of this work, from sitting at bedsides, from my grandmother herself, that people change in the directions they're capable of changing. You can't force the full distance. You can only witness how far they get. Daniel and I talk every Sunday now. That's new and it's good. The journal Dorothy left me is private. I've read it twice. It contains, among other things, 40 years of observations about this family written in her precise, slightly sardonic hand, her real opinions about people and choices, and the ongoing project of maintaining love in an imperfect family. She was harder on herself than anyone. She was clearer about her own failures than I expected. She wrote about missing my grandfather with a plainness that still breaks me open a little each time. She wrote about me too, pages of it. The 41 visits, yes, but also older things. Things she'd observed when I was 16, 22, 29. Things she'd thought about me that she'd carried for years without saying them aloud, because the time hadn't been right or the room hadn't been safe, or because she too had accommodated the family dynamic in ways she wasn't proud of. She saw me. She had been seeing me for a long time. That is the thing about my grandmother that I keep returning to. Not the letter, though. The letter mattered enormously. Mattered in ways that will take me years to fully understand. Not the storage unit, not the documented files, not the insurance policy circled in blue ink. The thing I keep returning to is a sentence she wrote in the journal in March of last year, 7 months before she died, on an unremarkable Tuesday when I had driven up and we'd spent most of the day watching old films she'd recorded off Turner Classic Movies. She wrote, "Nora was here today. She brought those shortbread cookies I like. We watched 3 films and talked about almost nothing of consequence, and it was the best day I've had in a long time. I've been trying to figure out what she gives me that nobody else does. I think it's this. She is completely present. She doesn't arrive thinking about when she'll leave. Some people are very good at leaving, and some people are very good at staying, and the world needs both. But only one of them is useful in the rooms where everything that actually matters is happening. Nora stays. That's worth something. It's worth more than the people around her seem to know. Someday I hope she knows it herself." I close the journal when I get to that entry. Every time. I close it and I set it down, and I go to the window of my small apartment in Burlington and watch whatever is happening outside. Cars, sky, the maple tree that loses its leaves in long stages every autumn. I think about my grandmother's hands at the writing desk, the drawer sliding open, the key she placed there 14 months before she died. She couldn't give me the house. She couldn't rewrite the math of what the family had accumulated and how it would be distributed. She couldn't retroactively insert my name into conversations where it had been absent. But she could leave me her voice. She could give me the record of what she actually saw, in her own words and in her own hand, read aloud in a room where my father sat and had to hear it. She could give me 40 years of her real self, in a journal, to read on Sunday mornings at a writing desk that was hers and is now mine. "Nobody needs Nora," my father said. "She'll be fine. She always lands somewhere." He was wrong about the first part. He was right, without meaning to be, about the last. If you've ever been the person in your family that everyone overlooked, the one who showed up without credit, who stayed without recognition, who gave without accounting, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below, and if this story stayed with you, please subscribe. There are more of these stories to tell, and the people in them deserve to be heard.